Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 23rd of June, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So I'm sure you all know what I'm going to spend much of this episode talking about today, and that's the news out of dYdX that their V4 is going to be a Cosmos kind of like app chain. It is not going to be a layer 2 on Ethereum. Their V3 will remain a layer 2, but V4 of the protocol will become a Cosmos app chain. Now, I've had, probably 24 hours to digest this, think about this. There's a lot to say here, a lot to unpack. I'm going to miss things. I'm going to say things people disagree with, but, I'm going to give my honest take on this, my honest opinion on this, starting from the top and then working my way down the stack here. So from the highest level, there are two things that I have come to the conclusion of. One, I don't think that dYdX has done this for technical reasons as much as I think they've done this for regulatory reasons, and I'm going to jump into that. And two, this does not mean layer 2s on Ethereum are dead. I've seen so many people calling for this, so many people saying that, oh, look, someone's leaving or an app is leaving the layer 2 ecosystem and turning into a kind of like app chain. That means layer 2s are inferior or they're bad or they're dead or whatever. No, not at all. And I'm going to dive into that as well again there. But first, I want to give a little bit of history about, I guess, kind of like the sovereign app chain versus layer 2 app chain, I guess, debate that's been going on for a while now. So the Cosmos ecosystem has existed for a while, for quite a while now, and they've always been a little bit antagonistic towards Ethereum because they disagree with a lot of Ethereum's design decisions. They disagree with Ethereum proof of stake. They think that Cosmos proof of stake or Tendermint is superior. They disagree with the with sharding. They disagree with the overall design architecture of layer 2s because they like sovereign app chains and things like that. So there is a very big disagreement in design architecture there. And I think Polkadot would also fall into that, but their design is definitely different to Cosmos and Ethereum. But Cosmos and Ethereum are basically, I mean, they've been friendly for a while, but I think these days it's a lot less friendly because there's just so much fierce competition for apps and for users and all that sort of stuff that's surrounding that. So that's a bit of history there. But then also there was kind of like another announcement that came out, over 2 years ago now, I think. No, not over 2 years ago, like about a year and a half ago in December of 2020, where Compound actually announced something called Comp Chain or Compound Chain, where they were also going to make a standalone app chain, not using Cosmos. I believe they were going to use Polkadot substrate in order to make a standalone Compound Chain. Now, at the time, I thought this was bizarre. I didn't understand why they were doing this, but at the time, the Layer 2 ecosystem in December of 2020 was way less mature than it is today. So I could kind of understand the rationale there to some extent. But then I wrote this piece back then called Compounding Confusion because I was confused a lot about this and I gave my reasoning here. And it was a lot of the same reasons why I'm confused about dYdX's move to kind of like an app chain rather than a layer 2. So I'll link this in the YouTube description for you to have a read of this piece. It's one of my longer pieces in the Daily Gwei here. But I just wanted to kind of like give some context that this isn't the first time a major app on Ethereum has announced that they were building their own chain. Comp Chain didn't go anywhere. I believe that it is not currently on the roadmap. I believe they're going to be trying to deploy Compound to layer 2s, and then they want to do some kind of like inter-layer 2 kind of like thing. And I'm not up to, completely up to date on what they're trying to do, but they definitely seems like they've abandoned the Compound Chain here. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen with dYdX. I do expect them to go ahead and launch their dYdX V4 app chain with kind of like using Cosmos. But yeah, that's, I guess, like orthogonal to what I wanted to talk about as well. So let's jump into a couple of tweets that I saw that I think really kind of like put this into context of why this is like not a good idea from an Ethereum perspective. So Swagtimus, who kind of like spends a lot of time in the Ethereum ecosystem, especially on the layer 2 side, said this: standalone dApp chains are one of the worst ideas in history. The downsides include token inflation to pay validators. Now, this is something that not a lot of people think about, but when you have your own sovereign app chain, you need to pay the validators for security. You no longer get to inherit the security from Ethereum layer 1 like a layer 2 does. You have to pay for it yourself. And the only way to do that is through token inflation, or you can try and rely on fees for it and have your token capped and hope the fee revenue accounts for enough to secure the network. But as we've seen from even like big networks like Bitcoin, that is not necessarily something that works out in practice. So 9 times out of 10, or almost 10 times out of 10, you're going to need token inflation. So that would already put pressure on a very that would put more pressure on an already very depressed token. dYdX is down over 90% from its all-time high, and 90% of the supply is not circulating, and 50% of the supply belongs to insiders being team and investors, which means that they would get the lion's share of the value from this anyway, from a proof of stake, I guess, like app chain sovereign network there. And then Swagtimus' next point is that, the low security versus being an L2 on a massive L1. Again, I just explained why this is the case, right? You're not inheriting Ethereum security. You're basically leaving Ethereum. You're leaving the massive fortress that is Ethereum, and you're going off into some little camp and hoping that you can secure it on your own with some kind of like guards or something like that, right? It's obviously very, very different. Third point from Swagtimus is that if your dApp gets exploited, your token dumps 90%, and with it, the security of the entire chain. We saw this play out with Terra, right? Where the Terra chain became extremely insecure because the Luna token kept dumping due to the death spiral with UST, and then the chain it was made insecure. It was paused by the validators, and obviously we saw the fallout from that, right? So the same is true for these apps, because these apps, in order to secure themselves, they need to secure themselves with their own native token if they want to be a sovereign app chain. And as I said, to do this, they have to do token inflation. A lot of the times, this token is not worth anywhere near the amount that Ethereum is worth. It has a much more concentrated token supply, and it is nowhere near as secure as Ethereum layer 1. So that also doesn't make sense there. And then Swagtimus kind of continues by saying, the biggest downside nobody talks about is how the hell are end users supposed to accurately assess the risks if every single dApp has its own stupid chain? You think we're going to have dashboards comparing the economic security of every little dApp? I mean, yeah, that's a very valid point, right? Like, if we're trying to make things easier for end users and trying to make things seamless and secure, making a new app chain that has to bootstrap its own security for everything is not the way to go about it. And I know the Cosmos people talk about shared security and stuff like that, but like, I'm going to get to that. Like, there's actually a Cosmos person's view on this that I'll get to. So I'm not going to get bogged down with that now. I just want to finish what Swagtimus says here. And he also, I think, had one final point here about rent extraction, which actually I'll talk about in a sec. So that's the Ethereans' view on this. That's basically my view and what I'm aligned most with. And that's kind of like what I think that most people that I've seen have talked about, really. And also, before I get into the Cosmos people's view, I did want to talk a little bit, and I should have mentioned this earlier, I did want to talk a little bit about dYdX themselves, and specifically Antonio, the founder of dYdX. He has said some questionable things in the past that I've covered on the Refuel. ZK Ben actually found this today in the Discord channel, where I covered a tweet from, I think, November 2021 that Antonio put out, where he said a few different things, but one of the things he said was that he was complaining about how EIP 1559 didn't reduce gas fees, when that wasn't the point of EIP 1559, right? So that comment alone may seem innocent in, I guess, like in a vacuum, but when you extrapolate that out and look at some of the other comments that he said, it's very clear that Antonio doesn't understand the more technical side of Ethereum. That he doesn't really understand how Ethereum plans to scale. He doesn't seem to understand layer 2s as well, which I'll get into a little bit when I talk about Starkware's role in all of this, because dYdX is obviously built using Starkware's technology. And from that perspective, it just feels like for some reason, they believe that they can build something better on a Cosmos app chain than they have today on a kind of like Ethereum. But that also falls into the regulatory stuff that I want to talk about as well. But I'll get back to that. I want to give the Cosmos person's view here. And this is Henry, who is I mean, from what I've seen on Twitter, he seems to be a pretty big Cosmos maxi. I'm sure he's not like a maxi, but he's a very big Cosmos person. So he quote tweeted Swagtimus, and a bit tongue-in-cheek here, but he basically said, building real projects on ETH is one of the worst ideas in history. The downsize must be designed around ETH's state model. Now, I mean, if this is true if you're building on layer 1, as far as I understand it, this is not true if you're building on layer 2. You can build whatever model you want on layer 2 as long as you just post your call data and proofs to layer 1 Ethereum. So he's just completely ignoring layer 2 here and just talking about Ethereum layer 1, which I think is wrong, but anyway, that first point, I guess, is true for layer 1, not true for layer 2. Second point, paying rent to ETH whales forever. This is one of the stupidest arguments that I see perpetuated throughout the ecosystem that I really don't like. And for the simple reason that like people have this wrong idea that just because you're paying Ethereum for security, you're paying rent to kind of like big ETH holders, or you're paying rent to ETH holders. Like, what you're doing is you're paying the Ethereum network for security. And how does Ethereum secure itself? With a valuable ETH. The more valuable the ETH token is, the more secure Ethereum is, right? Because it costs more to attack under proof of work and proof of stake, the more valuable the token is. So you're not paying rent for nothing. It's not like Ethereum is a rent-seeking middleman. You're paying for the security. Ethereum gives you security in return for the fees that you're paying to it. So I always hated this concept of people saying, oh, you're paying rent, like Ethereum is doing nothing for you, that like Ethereum is some fat cat landlord that is just taking rent from you and not helping you in any way. No, Ethereum is giving you something really awesome in return for that, right? And on top of that, if you have an app chain that's secured by its own token, isn't the rent just being paid to those token holders anyway, right? Like, for example, on dYdX chain, they're going to use the dYdX token to secure it. Aren't you just paying rent to dYdX token holders in that kind of like vein, right? That's the logic that follows on from here. But anyway, next point, Henry says, is someone selling land to apes? Gas spikes 9,000%, and with it, your app is unusable. Again, this applies to layer 1 Ethereum. It does not apply to layer 2, which I think sovereign app chains and Cosmos app chains should be compared to layer 2. And this doesn't necessarily happen because there are ways for layer 2s to essentially read the chain and say, okay, is there a spike in gas? Okay, we won't post our proofs and our data yet. We'll wait and then we'll do it. And that's exactly what Arbitrum does. And that's how you kind of like smoothen out the fees there. So that again is not an issue for layer 2s, and it's kind of disappointing that Henry, maybe this was just a shit post, but it's kind of disappointing that he didn't kind of like talk about the fact that this does not apply to layer 2s here. So, and then he goes on and says, the only real difference between a layer 2 and an app chain is whether it posts state routes to Ethereum. And judging by people's willingness to use multi-sig bridges, nobody really cares about that. So this is really dumb logic by saying the only real difference is it posts state routes to Ethereum. That is the major difference between being an insecure chain and being a secure chain. Like, that is literally everything. It's not like only the real difference. Like, just the way he's kind of like watered down how important this is kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And then he said, because people are willing to use multi-sig bridges, no one cares about this. That again goes back to the same logic that people apply to decentralization. Like, no one cares about decentralization. Well, fucking yes, they do. They're going to care about it when their funds get stolen or their funds kind of like, or the chain that they're on becomes insecure and their kind of like funds go to zero, or some other kind of like stuff that happens when the chain is insecure. They're going to care. They're going to care a lot. So that attitude is really dangerous and I don't like it at all. But yeah, that's the Cosmos people's view there. Obviously with my biased interpretation of it. Again, guys, like, I am an ETH person. Everything that I'm saying here is going to come with bias. It is impossible for me to remove my bias when it comes to these sorts of things. I try to stay on the technical details, but as I explained at the start, the Cosmos ecosystem, while technically I think it's cool, it's a very different architectural vision to what Ethereum is trying to do. And there actually isn't a right or wrong here. There is a belief that people have that the Ethereum kind of like vision is better than the Cosmos vision, but there is no objectivity to a lot of these things, at least not right now. I think we have to wait and see how it plays out and see how it all goes. Like, I obviously believe in Ethereum's roadmap and believe in the layer 2 thesis and the rollup thesis. I don't think sovereign app chains are actually a good thing, but there are people that do, and they don't just believe this for their bags, because the funny thing is the Atom token doesn't actually accrue value from the app chains at all, and then people will say, oh, well, there's going to be shared security and interchain security, and it's like, okay, well then aren't the sovereign app chains, wouldn't they just be paying rent to Cosmos or to Atom holders in that case? Because why would they connect to Cosmos for shared security if they need to pay for that in Atom, right? Then for as far as I understand it, like, they can still keep their sovereignty apparently, but they'd be paying for that shared security. Like, okay, what's the point? Just become a layer 2 and pay Ethereum for your shared security. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's all these kind of like things that come together. And I spoke about yesterday how I think that a lot of these changes end up looking like Ethereum in the end. And I think Cosmos will as well. They're going to try and keep that sovereignty. But I think that once we see these chains get probably more attacked and there's more kind of like concerted attacks on them, because there are groups out there, guys, like the North Korean hackers who hacked the Axie Infinity Bridge. They're not going to stop at that. They're going to target any insecure system. So let's not keep building them. Like, let's build secure systems. But anyway, that's all that there. And there's a tweet from Polynya here as well that I'm going to go over, but I want to pause here and go back to my kind of like points around why I believe that this is not so much a technical thing that dYdX is doing and more a regulatory thing. The reason I believe that is because right now, Starkware's technology that that dYdX is using has a license and is centralized. It is not open source, or at least it is open source and has a license attached to it or something like that, and you can't use it, whatever. It is very close. It is very vendor lock-in right now. For those of you who don't know the term, it basically means that there are vendors that exist, they offer their technology to you, and then they lock you into it because like it's not open source, it has a license attached to it, all that sort of stuff there. So there's that kind of like aspect to it. Now, the reason why I think it's got to do with regulatory stuff is because right now dYdX can't actually decentralize because there's a centralized sequencer that powers their layer 2. Obviously, in the future, well, I mean, I hope in the future, Starkware is going to have the ability to decentralize that sequencer out, and anyone can run a sequencer potentially, right? But right now, that's not the case. So dYdX, in their blog post, in the announcement, they kept going on about decentralization. And I think this is because dYdX is a US-based team. They've been very, very cautious of regulators, even going as far as not even airdropping the dYdX token to US citizens, right? And I think what they're doing is they're trying to decentralize as fast as possible because they want to be able to say to regulators, hey, we're decentralized. We're not running the order book. We're not running the exchange. It's in the hands of token holders. And they're going to kind of like beat around the bush with that as well and not bring to the surface the fact that 50% of the token holders are the team and the investors. But it's one big psyop, I think, for regulators here. So I actually think it's got way less to do with the technical stuff and way more to do with the regulatory stuff, which falls into the technical stuff because obviously if they were able to decentralize using Starkware's technology today, they may have gone down that road instead of starting their own app chain. So I think eventually this is going to be a non-issue for layer 2s as they obviously decentralize out, as they offer these kind of like applications the ability to decentralize as well. But from that perspective, I can kind of get it. But the thing is, they're never going to say that, they being dYdX. They're never going to say that. They're never going to admit that. They're never going to talk openly about that. It's just speculation on my part, but I'm not the only one who said this. I've talked to a lot of people about this, and the logical conclusion is this at the end of the day. I just don't think there's any technical reason for people to do this. And Antonio was on Twitter today saying that people have vastly overestimated how scalable layer 2s are. And that's just completely wrong because we know how scalable they are. We know how scalable they're going to be. We've seen it in practice. And the funny thing is that on Starknet, on dYdX's Starkware implementation, they're not even hitting anywhere close to the limits of what Starkware can do. I think they're doing like 10 TPS or something like that. So to use more scalability as well as a kind of like as a reasoning here, doesn't really sit well with me as well there. So that's kind of like on the regulatory front. That's why I think what I think around there. But I'm going to quickly try and wrap this up because I've talked about this for a while now. But Polynya had an interesting tweet thread about this as well. Basically saying, technically everything that dYdX wants to do with the Cosmos app chain can be done with rollups, and better yet for so many reasons. But there are two advantages for going with this kind of, I guess, sovereign app chain. Obviously, one of them is sovereignty. The second one is timing. Timing got to do with rollups not being as mature yet because they can't decentralize. And sovereignty, well, you're not going to be able to get sovereignty with an Ethereum secured rollup because you don't have your own validator set. But in return, you get security. So it's kind of like a trade-off there. And I'm not convinced that like most things even need sovereignty. I really don't think that anything except the settlement layer needs sovereignty, but that's a discussion for another day. But that was Polynya's take here as well. So I think there's one more. Yeah, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about with regards to this, and that's how I think Antonio was on Twitter. I'm not sure if this was said in the blog post, but basically he said that the community DAO or dYdX token holders are going to vote on this to make the final decision on whether dYdX v4 happens, which again is so stupid because I said in my tweet here that this is just like them. This is basically them saying that their team and investors will ensure that the vote goes the way they want them to. They're not going to get to the point where they have V4 ready to launch, put the vote to the community, and basically let the community vote against this, and then say, oh, well, we tried, that's it. No, they're fucking not going to do that. They're going to get all of their friends, investors, insiders, everyone, and they're going to vote to do this because it's just a decentralization theater here, guys. Like, this is not actual, decentralized governance. And that's another thing that I saw, and I was just like, yeah, okay, that's a joke for sure. But yeah, that's my overall take on the whole thing with tweets from smart people and kind of like trying to give the Cosmos view on this and even the Ethereum view. And I want to end with saying that I don't think Cosmos is bad tech. I actually think they have a lot of interesting things going on. I don't think the Cosmos people are bad people. They're actually one of the least kind of like maxi-like people, or least kind of like Alt L1 shills that I've seen. But as I said, there is a very, very fundamental philosophy behind the design of a blockchain. The Cosmos people have their own philosophy, Ethereum people have their own philosophy, and we're not going to really know what is quote unquote the winner in terms of kind of like long-term market share for a while yet. So we're going to see how it plays out. I think that layer 2s are still going to be the vastly superior solution, but there will be some other apps that potentially do this as well, trying to move to their own app chain. I think it's a fool's errand. I don't think they should. I think that there's not going to be as many as people think there are. And I really do think that the layer 2s are just going to keep growing and thriving. And this doesn't mean that layer 2s are dead. It's not bearish for Ethereum that one of the big layer 2 projects has migrated to an app chain, because they haven't done it yet. Right? They've just kind of like put the idea out there. There's a lot of arguments as to why what they're doing is a bad idea. We've already seen that Antonio, the founder, doesn't really understand the technicals of a lot of things, and he's shown that with his tweets before. And also, there's no guarantee it's going to kind of like grow and succeed or be more successful than their layer 2 implementation. Now, they say they're going to maintain both. Well, what are they going to put more effort into? Probably the app chain. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them just kind of like let the layer 2 die off, so they can basically say, oh, well, the layer 2 is not getting any usage anymore. We're just going to shut it down and focus on our app chain. It's like, all right, guys, cool. Like, I mean, if you neglect something, then that's what's going to happen. But we're going to have to see. I think this is planning to be launched by the end of this year. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. But I don't know. I don't expect that many kind of like apps to do this. And if they do, I don't really expect them to be successful here. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. And see how we go from there. So, spoken about that enough. I'm going to go over the last few things I want to get through for the last 10 minutes here. So, I put out a tweet today where I said, Ethereum's roadmap is very ambitious, full of interesting challenges, and will probably take 5 to 10 years to be fully fleshed out. If you stay around a while and pay enough attention, you may just witness the creation of a new internet. So, I mean, this is kind of related to what I was just talking about, but the Ethereum roadmap is not something that can be rushed. It is not something that's going to happen overnight. It is something that's going to happen over the next decade or so. And I'm talking about like all of the roadmap items, right? Like not just the merge, proof of stake, sharding, all that sorts of stuff. I'm talking like vertical tries, snarkifying the base layer, history pruning, all these sorts of like, there's so much that's coming, guys. Like I can't even name all of it right now, but there's so much that's coming, and it's bleeding edge stuff. It's going to take a while to be fully fleshed out. But if you stay around, if you kind of like stay through the market cycles, don't get scared off by bear markets, you will quite literally witness history here. If Ethereum succeeds at what it's trying to do, it will be the creation of a new internet and a global financial settlement layer at that as well, which I think is huge. Like we've never had that before in history. In human history, we've never had a global, credibly neutral settlement layer for anything in the world to settle on. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And we also have never had a decentralized internet except in the very early days of the internet, and then it kind of like centralized very quickly. So if we can make a decentralized, credibly neutral settlement layer and a decentralized internet in kind of like the same network here, with a bunch of networks kind of like spinning off of that and being secured by it, I think that is incredibly bullish for Ethereum. And obviously ETH as a token captures a lot of that value for reasons I've outlined plenty of times in the past, right? 1559, staking, uses money, store of value, all that sorts of stuff there. But yeah, that is the Ethereum vision at the end of the day, guys. It's not this day-to-day, oh, this app's moving off and going and doing their own app chain, blah, blah, blah. It's not really about that. Ethereum is not competing with dYdX, for example, right? Ethereum is competing with basically the existing system and trying to make a better, the existing traditional finance system, and trying to make a vastly superior system to that, and trying to do it the best it can while holding its decentralization values very close to the chest. So just wanted to put that out there as well. I guess that was related to everything I was talking about. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to this as well. Like I'm not going anywhere, obviously. I'm looking forward to seeing how the next 10 years shakes out. I think it's going to be a very interesting 10 years, that's for sure. All right, so actually I should have talked about this just before, but this was funny timing. L2Beat released their rollup explorer and force exit tool for dYdX here. So this obviously applies to the layer 2 implementation of dYdX, and you can see the tool here at dydx.l2beat.com. This basically shows you, I guess, like it's like a block explorer basically, and it also has a force exit tool for you to be able to exit from the dYdX rollup if you would like to do that. I thought this was very cool, but I thought the timing was also pretty funny considering that this came out, I think, an hour after dYdX announced that they're doing their app chain. But still cool to see this. I've spoken about this before. I think L2Beat teased this a few months ago, and now it's finally live. So you can go check this out, play around with it if you are a user of dYdX. This obviously is not going to apply to the app chain, only to the L2 implementation, but go check it out if you haven't already. All right, so Galleon has announced a new product today, the launch of the basis yield ETH index live on Optimism. So you can now generate organic yield during bull and bear conditions with this index, which is called BUY, which is the token ticker, which is a delta neutral leveraged basis trade, basis strategy using SET and perpetual protocol, backtesting at 27% APY in 2021. And then this thread basically explains what it is. So essentially, what a delta neutral leverage basis strategy is something that a lot of traders have used for a very long time in both traditional kind of like finance and crypto markets. It's more of an exotic kind of financial product, and it basically allows you to capture the spread between the funding, kind of like leverage funding being positive or negative, right, on different kind of like platforms. So by capturing that spread, you basically get to capture the difference in the APY, and that can, as kind of like the backtesting showed, lead to an outsized APY here. So read this thread from Galleon to get a full breakdown of this and how it all works. Keep in mind, these kind of more exotic products definitely need more understanding than just your basic products because of the fact that they involve things that you may not have thought about before. So definitely read about it before you go and like ape into it or anything like that. But yeah, definitely check out this from Galleon here. I think it's pretty cool. All right, so an update from zkSync here today. So they've added, there was a kind of like a tweet that they had here, which is now unavailable, which is kind of annoying. I think this was talking about their kind of like, I think this is the tweet here. So this is their zkSync v2 testnet upgrade. Okay, yeah, there we go. And then it includes a bunch of new features that come with it, such as account abstraction, which is very, very cool. Smart contract wallets, the ability to pay gas in other tokens other than ETH. But yeah, you can kind of like, I haven't retweeted this yet. I'm going to retweet that. You can go check out this blog post for a full breakdown of kind of like everything that came with it. But as I said, this is on the testnet. This is not on mainnet just yet. But yeah, I guess this is really cool to see. And I've spoken about this over the past few weeks, so I won't dive too deep into it here. But yeah, cool to see this from Matter Labs on zkSync today. All right, finally here we have an update from Polygon that Polygon ID is now live. So the first Polygon ID integration is with the Polygon DAO, and Polygon ID is a self-sovereign identity solution powered by zk cryptography that brings huge potential for DAO governance. So you can read this thread for kind of like a breakdown of this. But as I said to you guys before, I think one of the main narratives going forward is going to be this kind of like concept of decentralized identity and how that plays into all the things that we're used to, such as DAOs and just governance in general and token holder governance and all that sorts of stuff. I think if we can get to a truly sovereign decentralized identity solution that actually works and works at scale, that's like a holy grail. And I think we can do a lot of cool stuff from there. We can, like, just as an example here, we could potentially do under-collateralized lending, which is something that we haven't been able to do in DeFi. And we can do that at scale as well. So you'd be able to potentially one day get a mortgage in DeFi without having to kind of like over-collateralize like you have to do today. So that's something I'm definitely looking forward to, that something like this enables. But you can read this thread from Polygon here for a full breakdown of everything. And they also have a blog post, I believe, as well. But I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.